Welcome back to Accountability Immersion Training, and we're doing another live stream, but I'm recording this one because I wanted to make sure that I cover a couple elements that I've already prepared in a past program, Effortless Enrollment Mastery. In the Commitment to Leadership Mastery module, we actually cover some of this stuff, but I wanted to also give you some preparation and some commentary around it as well. So, as we have in weeks past in Accountability Immersion Training, these live streams, we've been talking about some really critical distinctions and some kind of additional nuts and bolts and understandings that are really there to support you in mastering accountability coaching. And today we're talking about why your accountability coaching sucks. And there's only really two major reasons why it might suck, other than just like the skill set that you need to build, but all of the techniques and the nuts and bolts and the how-to and the steps and the conversational frameworks and flowcharts, all the paint by numbers stuff, it's all given to you here in Accountability Immersion Training. So today I'm going to discuss two big things that hold coaches back, that really make it so that even if they should be able to be great accountability coaches, even coaches I've trained in these elements still kind of suck at the end of the day in their accountability coaching, and why? Like, why does that actually happen? And we're going to cover two elements. The first thing that really holds coaches back, let's start with that. This is especially around accountability, of course. This is around what I call filters and perceptions. So now, you could say universally this holds anybody back from almost anything, but especially as an accountability coach, you know, there are so many things that we need to be able to do as accountability coaches that are above and beyond what your regular conversation might be with a human being. They actually fly in the face of some of our expectations and rules about how we need to treat each other as well. So our filters and perceptions can really cause us ultimately to not be very good accountability coaches. So let me explain to you what I mean. As I was growing up, I was a little bit more of a reclusive kid than most, and I had a lot of alone time. I read a lot of books. And even when I was like in class, or I was at camp, or I was at the pool around a lot of other kids, and it's not that I didn't have any friends at all, luckily, but I had a lot of alone time. And one of the things that I noticed that I think a lot of kids my age were not noticing is that I got a chance to see and observe human behavior and human psychology, because I just took the time to actually really watch the way people operated. And I started to, over time, and anybody who would take the time to do this would see that there's some repeatability to the way human beings operate. There are patterns, if you will. We are not just random machines that just generate anything at any point. We have mechanisms that are more perpetual. They're repetitive. They are looping in nature, if you will. Kind of the way that like a wind-up toy, you'd wind them up and they would just kind of do the same thing over and over again. Now, we're not quite as simplistic as a wind-up toy, obviously, but I did notice some mechanisms that were going on with people, even as a young kid. And I remember one time, I think it was like fourth grade, I started, this was the time when like some of the kids were just starting to learn that there were members of the opposite sex and that we actually could form relationships together. And so I started making all these notes about all the points that the guys and girls were getting in terms of who might like who. This is not uncommon that, this is part of the gossip. And so, my friends would come to me and say, hey, who likes me? Who do you think I have their attention, right? And it was just a kind of a part of, or a function of, this kind of automatic, drive for me to observe rather than necessarily be a part of life. I was kind of standing back and seeing what was going on. And so years later, I'm actually a coach. At the time I was working for Tony Robbins, and I was joining into many of these other kind of outside trainings for professional development and personal development and growth that a lot of my fellow coaches were taking part in. And so I joined this training that about 150 people were a part of. I think it was maybe even more, a little bit more than that, almost 200 people. And I'm sitting in the audience, and this is just average Joes, off the street. I mean, this was not full of coaches or, leadership or anything like that. There were some people like that there. I was one of them, but there were also just plenty of people that were just like from the average household in the United States as well. Just from our culture, our U.S. culture, that they were there. And so I started listening, of course, and this seminar began, and this trainer started explaining how, people have these little insanities that we do that are repetitive, and we kind of do the same thing over and over again, and we kind of get locked into these ways of being and ways of thinking and these perceptual filters, these ideas that are they're not our own, right? That we kind of just inherited. And I'm sitting there hearing this, and I'm nodding. I'm like, yeah, of course. That's like, I could totally agree with what this guy is saying. And this is like, it's interesting. I love hearing what he's talking about because it's enlightening, but it's not something that I'd never thought of before. This was something that was not really new to me. And I'm looking around at the rest of the students of this particular training, and their jaws are just wide open. They're like, like they'd never heard anything like this, right? He was blowing their minds with what I felt was just kind of should have been common sense in a way. And so I started to realize that what I had learned when I was young, and what I had kind of almost always thought of and continue to think even to this day, and to that day when I was in that crowd, wasn't very common at all. A lot of people don't even notice how they perceive things, how they filter the world, and that they didn't just come up with that stuff. Like, it was actually something to some extent they didn't control. That it's being influenced, if not very much controlled, by other things that they inherited or passed along to them. And the automaticity of that, if that's a word, the automaticness of it. And over time, after having gone to that training, I started applying these understandings to my own growth, my own development, my own transformation, if you will. And what I really learned, starting that day especially, and still to this day, is that the more I can see my own perception, my own filters, the things that are not really me, but they are given to me by being human, if you will, that I can actually make change happen. I can actually transform when I actually know what's running me and what's really like running the show that's not me, if you will. And I think that's gigantically key to what you can offer your clients as an accountability coach. But also, I think it's important, if you're going to become a master accountability coach, you must be able to transform yourself, because you are the greatest limitation on the coaching session as an accountability coach. And you've got to make sure you lift that limitation as much as humanly possible. So let's go ahead and watch this segment of a video from Effortless Enrollment Mastery inside of the second module from that training, module 2, which we call Commitment and Leadership Mastery. So there are a lot of distinctions around accountability in that module, especially. But here we're going to talk about perceptions and filters. Let's take a look. So you're now going to begin in the Commitment and Leadership Mastery module to capture who you are and see yourself clearly. This is part of commitment, is knowing who's actually doing the committing, who's actually following through or not following through on their commitments. So we want to start, first of all, with the perception of human being, the phenomenon of perception. Now, contrary to what you might think, the phenomenon of perception is not some passive phenomenon. you're perceiving the world, and the way you perceive or the way you see the world, the way you listen to what's going on, is not something where it's like sitting back and watching TV and just passively letting the shows go by. That is not how perception works. The activity of seeing, hearing, and feeling, the perceptions that we have available to us, is actually a very active and very continuous kind of thing that is skewing and shaping everything that is for you before it even shows up. So let me be clear about this, that your perceptions are actually happening before the thing that you're perceiving even is there. Also, perception is totally not a personal phenomenon. There's no perception that's personal to you. So you're perceiving this video right now, you're perceiving me right now exactly the same way that everyone else is perceiving me right now. Just consider that regardless of where you were brought up or how you were brought up, that all people have a common perception of life. The perception of humanity transcends the perception of you as an individual, and even transcends the perception within a culture. There is a shared perception, even before something happens, that is waiting for the thing to occur. So there's two parts of perception that we clarified here. The first one is that it's something that's already waiting. It's happening, the perceiving is happening before the act itself, before the reality actually occurs. And that perception is really just waiting for the reality to happen so it can go ahead and perceive the way it was already going to perceive. And the second piece is that that's not personal. The way that you're perceiving that, the way that you're already waiting to perceive that thing as it's about to happen, is not your own personal perception. It's a perception that's shared throughout humanity. So it's something that's pervasive and already prepared. It's like prepared and pervasive. So now we're going to start to look at this phenomenon of perception and actually see it for what it is. In other words, you're actually going to have a chance to observe your own perception and get a sense of not only what it's like now, but how it actually developed. I'm going to start by reading the beginning of the book Winnie the Pooh. So let's go ahead and look at the first page of Winnie the Pooh. Here we go. Here is Edward Bear coming downstairs now. Bump, bump on the back of his head, behind Christopher Robin. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs. But sometimes he feels that there really is another way. If only he could stop bumping a moment and think of it. And then he feels that perhaps there isn't. Anyhow, here he is at the bottom and ready to be introduced to you, Winnie the Pooh. Consider that all of humanity lives this way. All of humanity is bumping, bumping, bumping their head as it slowly moves along downstairs or down the road or down the ears of their lives. One of the most powerful breakthroughs that distinguishing the perception of human beings makes available is the breakthrough of actually becoming aware. Being aware begins with being aware of the degree to which you are not aware. The only way you can become aware is to become aware of how unaware you are. And then you are aware of your own being aware. Because you don't really perceive anything, you aren't aware. In fact, you're so unaware that you're unaware of how much you're unaware. Said another way, consider that you go through your entire life being unaware and unaware of how unaware you are. It's by distinguishing the perception of human beings that a breakthrough in being aware and being responsible for what is driving your life becomes possible. So we're now going to distinguish this dimension of the perception of human being. So consider that when you're born, You're born into certain ways of perceiving in our culture, in our space of being human. There was already lots going on before you showed up in the world. So at some point, you can start to see, hear, feel, etc. as you grow up. And then, after a certain period of time, you actually start talking about it. We then start to acquire the perceptions of human beings. And we actually acquire beliefs the same way everyone else acquires them because we have the same perceptions. These kind of perceptual filters, if you will, are things that we all inherited. You inherited this. This is a space for being human. It's a room that we all walked into at some point after we were born. It's this space. And we just went right into that space. We filled that space because that's the space of human being. That's the space for being human. And as you acquired access to communication, access to understanding, you acquired the limitations of those perceptions, the limitations of those things. You will never be able to identify when or where it started exactly because your whole awareness is shaped by it. You're unaware that the awareness was being shaped, and especially how it was being shaped. Other than the beliefs that you have, and that's all content within your awareness, right? We talked about that in our last module. Beliefs and values, etc. There are actually things that are above that that help those to form. And these are contextual filters that control your behavior, and you have these filters. These filters, these perceptions, are common to all human beings, and it shapes your entire world. We're now going to look at the perception of human beings in terms of the filters that created them. And these are filters that are common for all human beings. And to do that, we're going to go live to the original Commitment and Leadership program.
So consider that when you're born into certain ways of perceiving in our culture of being human. There was already a lot going on before you showed up here. And at some point, you start to see things. Blurry vision becomes more precise. You start to hear things. You start to feel things. These are your three main input channels. Like if you're a computer, the keyboard, if there's a mouse, those are the input channels that allows the computer to perceive certain things. You've got these input channels, seeing, hearing, and feeling. And also we've got taste and smell, but generally speaking, those are not driving you. Those are a little bit more of the old brain, the reptilian brain. So generally speaking, that doesn't drive your entire behavior like seeing, hearing, and feeling does. So what happens, you see things, you hear things, you feel things, and you get pleasure, and then you get pain. And then what happens is you learn how to talk about it. And then you start talking. You start understanding and perceiving and talking and going in your head, in your own linguistics. And you start judging the pleasure and pain that you've perceived. So when we start to acquire these perceptions, we actually acquire beliefs the same way everyone else acquires them because we have the same perceptions, the same basic input channels. You inherited this. This is the space, like we said, a listening, which is more like a clearing, like a space that something can come into. This is a space for being human. So you could be like, as they call, a clean slate when you're born, but you're kind of like also you're a vacuum. And then so you just create this specific space that's filled up with content, but the space is what designates the content in the first place. So as you acquired access to communication, you also acquired the limitations of those things. You'll never be able to identify when it started, where it started also. I mean, try to think about or locate when you started perceiving. You can't perceive it because before, if you find the dividing line, you wouldn't perceive it because it's not there. It doesn't exist for you. There is nothing other than perception. You will never be able to identify it because your whole awareness was shaped by it. In fact, your entire awareness exists only because of your perception. Other than the beliefs that you have, that's content, beliefs and values, like we just talked about your values, what's most important to you in life, that's just your content. That's a software program that you loaded up into your hardware. The hardware is running it all. So there are contextual filters that control your behavior, and all of you have, and it shapes your entire world. So you're actually in this space where we have to ask you a question. Are you actually seeing the world? Are you actually seeing the world? Now's the time where you answer that. What's your answer to that?
No.
I'm perceiving. I'm perceiving the world.
Yeah, so are you actually seeing it, though? Are you seeing the world, yes or no?
No.
No. No, you're not. You've never seen the world. It's always referenced against the filters and programming that all human beings have. So what are the filters? What are the filters you have for the world? You've got what you hear, what you see, what you touch, right? What you feel internally, what you visualize internally, what the voice that talks to you in your head, sounds you make internally as well. So you've got internal feelings, sounds, language, and visualizations, things that you make up, right? And then you've got everything that's external that you see, supposedly. And everything that's external that you hear, and language that you hear, the words that you hear, and everything external that, from external stimulus that you actually feel. So you've got internal and external phenomenon. So I'm going to ask you now to take a second and just listen for those filters and look for them too. How do you filter what you see? Just notice it. Don't answer that. Just notice. How are you filtering? What are you looking at right now? How are you filtering that? Why are you looking there? What are you feeling? Externally and internally. Why do you focus on that? Why wouldn't you focus on your left toe rather than your right toe? Why are you doing that? Just because I said that? What are you an opening for in the world? Just notice it. What are you doing internally? What are you doing externally? What does that voice that talks to you in your head say? What does it listen for? Okay, I'd like to hear some specifics to that because because we're on the phone, because we're in a coaching conversation, there's much of this is language, much of this is higher level distinctions. We're actually using words primarily a lot of the time to actually get results to happen. I'd like you actually to answer the question, what is that voice that talks to you in your head? What does it say? What is it saying right now? And also, what are the issues that it deals with? In other words, what is it listening for? Who can share? And I'm going to ask most of you to do this. So I'm going to coach. This is the time where participation is really key. So get on the court here. This is a commitment leadership program.
Voice inside my head listens to hear my name.
Uh-huh. Okay, and so what about that? Like, why is it listening for that?
Everyone's does. I mean, we all know that's like you said, it's music.
Yeah, I know, but
ears.
for you, why does it listen for that? Like, what would you say? Like, what's that about?
Probably, I don't really have a great answer for that. It's just probably because that is how I identify myself and how other people identify me. So I know when something has to do with me, it's normally going to be referenced to me by my name. I don't know how to say it. It's just kind of how it works.
Okay.
It's really instinctual.
Right. Okay. So what's the instinct, though? That's what we're distinguishing. And by the way, you may not have that answer. Somebody else in the group have an answer for that? What's the instinct that listens for your name?
Do I exist?
Can you say that again?
It's like, do I exist?
Uh-huh. Right.
Am I a part of this?
Right. So do I exist? Or that's the whole thing about you. It's like the self-image. How do I look? What's in it for me? What's what's going on? What's happening? Is this good or is this bad? What does this mean?
Mine's always, am I doing it right?
Right? Am I right or am I wrong? Is he right, she right, or is she wrong, he wrong? Right or wrong? It's a common distinction that you're looking for constantly. What else? What else does that voice listen for? What else does it say?
That voice looks for praise.
Good. Is it good? Am I good or am I bad? Am I a good boy or am I a bad boy? Totally.
Jeff, this is Carol. It seems to me that the filters would be influenced by past experiences of pain and pleasure.
They're actually way before you ever had any pain or pleasure. These types of filters linguistically actually existed.
Well, I was just thinking, you asked me why are we looking at our left toe instead of our right toe, because I always look at my left toe.
Okay.
Because it's just habit, and, it's something I have to change, I guess.
Why?
So listen to that, though. It's like I should do that, I shouldn't do that, right?
Uh-huh.
Those are your should and shouldn't. That's a natural one, right? So you're talking to yourself about whether you should or shouldn't look at your left toe, right?
Right.
What you look for. What about, but we're going to stay in language because language is very simple and malleable. It's very controllable. What else?
Being right or wrong.
Yeah, am I right or am I wrong? Is it good or is it bad? Is it true or is it false? Do I agree with that or do I disagree with that? It's a common one. Why should I? This is what you guys are constantly asking for the last 2 months. Why? Why should I do that assignment? Some of the individuals who are consistently not here are constantly asking, why should I be on this call right now? Why bother? Or of course, even beyond the why, this one's makes you even more nauseous, which is because. Because this, because that. Because is such that frame of reference, that language pattern, that listening is so controlling in your nature, it's so deeply set that it's actually there are books that are written on the power of the word because. Actually, you have more power when you say because over another human being. You actually have triple the amount of power than if you didn't use the word because. Unbelievable. It's literally a control mechanism. What's wrong? What's right about this? I should do that. I shouldn't do that. And here's the big one that as consultants and coaches we get a lot. How do I do it? It's one of the biggest language patterns that stops people from taking action is I don't know how.
Tell me how. Give me the answer.
Yeah, tell me how. So, and then what do your eyes look for? What do they see? What are you looking for when you're walking around during the day? What do you look for?
Acceptance, approval.
Looking for that in people's faces, I guess, I'm assuming, when you're relating to people, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure. So there's more, and then you can take it right back into the language pattern as well. But you're literally looking for that.
Commonality, like looking for commonality, too, comes up.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we're going to get to why that is in a second. So what else? I'd like to hear a couple others share. What else? What are you looking for? What do your eyes look for?
Say that again?
I look for opportunity.
Ah.
A good one.
Opportunity. What's in it for me?
Mm-hmm.
Can I get out of this? Okay, what else? What else do your eyes look for? What do you see? And by the way, what your eyes are looking for, if I was to ask you the question, what do you see all day? That's what you're looking for. So what do you see all day?
This is Jordana.
Mm-hmm.
Things I like or things I don't like, things I want to do or I don't want to do.
Uh-huh. Do I really want to do this? Do I feel like it? We've heard that one from you before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely your thing. Okay? So let's continue. Also, what do you feel? What are you always feeling? What do you always, and by the way, there's no difference between what you're feeling and what you're feeling for. What you're an opening for as feelings. If you always feel a certain emotion, you're just an opening for that emotion. You're just waiting you're just waiting all day so you can feel that feeling that you feel every day. So what do you feel all day? What kind of feelings do you deal with? What do you have? What do you feel for? What are you feeling right now that has you not share? How about that?
Jeff, this is Joy. I all the things that were popping into my head were super positive. Like, I'll get excited a lot throughout the day, or I'll be, like anxious, but in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so anxious, and what was the first one?
Excited.
Excited. Anxious and excited. Okay, it's what you feel for. Okay, what else? Who else? What do you feel for all day? What do you feel all day? What do you feel on a daily basis? What are your emotions? And by the way, it's not just emotions, it's also just a sense of touch. What are you feeling all day? With people, your significant other, yourself?
Compassion.
Okay, what else?
Sadness and loneliness.
Yeah. That's what you feel for. What else? What do you feel for all day? By the way, you sharing this is part of just actually clearing it with the group. Because we know what you feel all day because we've talked to you for the last 2 months. You're just clearing it. In other words, you're just getting it straight. So it's a great opportunity for you.
Solitude.
Solitude. Okay, what was that after solitude?
This is Jordana.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like excitement. I just want to experience the excitement of being with my boyfriend and my son. That's my most enjoyable thing to do every day.
Yeah. Okay, last chance. What else? What do you feel all day? What do you feel for?
Pleasure.
Just what's pleasurable? What's in it for me again? Huh? So you live inside of all this, and all this is as if it's all real. It's constantly going. It's this sea of opinions and a sea.
So that whole conversation that we just completed in the Commitment to Leadership program was about those filters and actually starting to become aware of the common filters that every human being has. Right, wrong, what's in it for me, good, bad, true, false, agree, disagree, etc., etc., etc. You live inside of all that. And this is like it's constantly going. And it's a sea of opinions and filters. When? When is that happening? Now, now, now. It's happening right now. Can you hear it? Can you see it? Does it stop? Do you have anything to do with it? If you do, stop it and let me know that you have. This happens over and over and over and over again. These filters are they're running the show. So if you've ever wondered, who am I? Here's one possible answer. You are the being that's driven by that body of perceptions that really comes from and is governed by those filters. And what's even more absurd is that you think that's you. That's the big problem. You actually think that's you. You know all the times you say, I think, or I believe, or this is what's going on with me. That's not you, that's it talking. And you know that you're always consulting it. You're always talking to it. Even worse, it consults it. It talks to itself. It sees itself. The only difference between you and these people, these insane people that you see on the streets that are muttering, blah, 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 and saying all sorts of crazy stuff, is that you fit in. You have your crazy voice, your perceptions, all that stuff that goes on and on and on and over and over and over again that they have on external speaker. You've got yours on internal speaker. These are the puppet strings for you. It's there right now. You're doing it right now. So now I'm going to stop just for a second. I'm going to stop talking and just give you a chance to be aware of these input channels. These common filters. And so you have a chance to experience and just be aware of how you're already running that repetitive program. Go ahead, just listen to it. Listen to the voice. Listen to the opinions. Take a second and just be aware. Did you hear it? Did you notice it? None of that is you. Really, the most authentic thing that you can do is just breathe. And all this stuff that we're observing here is everything beyond that. That's why there's no difference between looking at yourself and looking at the world. There's no difference between looking at yourself and looking at the world. Because when you're looking at the world, you're seeing yourself. You're just seeing you perceiving it. You're just seeing the thing that it is processing. You look at your life, that's you. Can you begin to see that the world is what I just distinguished? And you can only share what you perceive in the world. Your thoughts, your feelings, etc. This is your world, and you can have no other world. It's like a force field. So if you want to create new possibilities with your prospects or your clients, you want to create yourself as a master coach, you want to get clients, you want to build a business, you want people to follow you where you like to go as a leader, as a coach, etc. But all the conversations up till now have not allowed that to happen. All the conversations you've had up till now have been such that that hasn't occurred. Then that's driven by these perceptions. And these perceptions are constraining that world. And you can't share, you can't do, you can't be who you need to be. Not because it's not possible, but because those perceptions have set up conversations that have you doing something other than that. So it's really like a force field. There's nothing that anybody can say to you. There's nothing that can happen to you that isn't already about to be bent and shaped and molded by your perception. And the paradox of commitment to leadership mastery is that whatever is distinguished, the distinctions that we're distinguishing here, have no impact on you. But when it lives as undistinguished, when you don't distinguish it, when you don't see it, you don't have awareness of it, it has total impact and in fact control over you. So something really powerful happens when you begin to become aware of your own perceptions and getting related to that. You never consciously shape your perceptions. And by the way, if at any time you've been listening or watching this video and you said, yeah, but that's not right because let me show you an example, or, I see where that's incorrect, or, I'm different than that, or whatever, had some kind of yeah, but, you just made my point. You just made a great example of how accurate this really is, because you're just agreeing or disagreeing or saying it's right or wrong or good or bad, which is exactly what's right here on this slide in front of you. In fact, even if you didn't disagree, even if you agreed or you just listened intently and you took notes or whatever went through your mind, whatever your perceptions were, everything that you thought throughout this entire section is on this slide. It's right here in front of you. So, okay, now that we've got that, one of the big questions you might have, which is, of course, right here in front of you on the video, how does this apply to me? So, okay, how does this apply to me? How does this apply to my coaching business? Here's how it applies. Your perceptions drive all your actions, and of course your actions drive your results. We've talked about this to some extent before. Another way of looking at this, and many coaches have coined this terminology before, the being, doing, having insight. Meaning that if you want to have something, then you've got to do certain things. And if you want to do those things, then you need to become someone or be a certain way. So being begets doing begets having. Being causes doing causes having. But what creates your being, who you be, is based upon the world occurring, how the world occurs. So really occurring, what we might call perceptions here, the way you filter the world, the way you see the world, creates being, doing, and having. The more you are aware of this, the more your automatic perceptions are let go of. and the more you start to really shape your own reality. The more you're aware, the more you can shape your own reality. And by the way, you're never getting anything in the world. No matter what you want or what you already have in the world, you're never getting that. You're just getting you and your perceptions about the world. That was a mouthful, I'm sure. And I hope that you captured and appreciated a lot of it. If not, watch it again. It's still there for you. But did you notice anything? Did you notice how your filters are running you? How your own kind of already inherited and already existing kind of automatic mechanisms are in charge just as much or more than you are really in charge. So let me ask you a question about that. Aren't you filtering the accountability technology? Aren't you filtering those conversations? Aren't your judgments and assessments around the various steps and various frameworks and various words that we have offered you to utilize as a coach? Haven't you already altered those, distorted those, filtered those, somehow limited those through your perceptions and filters, your perceptual filters? How does that filter, or how do those filters, how do those perceptions hold your accountability coaching back? Because I would wager that if you've learned the technology and you're really not executing powerfully, you're not a powerful accountability coach yet, that your perceptions and filters are what's holding you back in that area. That, as we say here, is why your accountability coaching sucks today. So it's really important to be aware of that, because if you're not aware of it, you can't change it. You can't transform it. What's invisible to your client is what holds them back from whatever they're accountable to do, and what is invisible to you, if it's these filters or perceptions, especially, these are the things that are going to hold you back as an accountability coach. So this part of the conversation is not about you transforming that even. Because really, if you knew what was holding you back, you could just be aware of it and then be accountable for making a change there, not letting that stop you. Today is more about you just being aware. Just be aware of the filters and perceptions that you currently have that are holding you back as an accountability coach. Write them down. Be responsible for them. Talk about them. Bring them up in coaching sessions. Bring them up in your next training session with me. Let's get on with it and deal with what's really going on for you so it doesn't hold you back. Okay, now we're going to move on to the second distinction that, in a big way, I think even more so than what we just covered, the perceptions and filters, that holds people back as accountability coaches. And this one's huge. I call this one crowd pleasing. And let me explain what I mean. There was a client more than 15 years ago that I worked with for several years, and he had a job, but he was really more naturally an entrepreneur. He was a real businessman, and he had a side business at the time that he just wasn't dedicated to. He was doing it a little bit. He was putting a few hours here and there in, but he had a full-time job, and he mostly worked that job. And so we clarified very easily and simply that he was never really going to have a successful business if he was consistently, blowing it off for the purpose of just meeting his basic expectations at his job. It just wasn't going to be enough hours in the day. Make sense? And it made sense to him. And so I said, well, why don't you just go ahead and you need to move past your job and really commit full time? Why don't you just do that? And I said, well, is it because of the money, or is it some other thing that there's no way you could do it? He's like, no, I could totally transition. I've got enough saved. I have a realistic transition plan. Like, I know what I'm doing in my business. I put this time in. I'm going to make the money up, and things are going to turn around, and I'm going to be in great shape eventually. And I said, so why don't you? And he said, well, my wife, she won't. She's not going to let me do this. I was like, what do you mean not let you? I mean, you're a free person to do what you wish, and you know it's what's best for you and your family, frankly. And he said, yeah, but she's gonna get really upset. Like anytime I even bring this up with her, she really, really gets triggered, if you will. And I could just tell, like I'm not, like, I think she'll just leave me if I do this. And I said, well, it sounds to me like as long as you're only trying to just please her, if you're really just living out your life to make sure like she's happy, like you're never gonna be able to make powerful decisions. Forget about your business and the rest of your life too. And maybe it doesn't impact the rest of your life. I didn't say that, but maybe it didn't impact the rest of his life as much, right? But definitely impacted this area. He was going to hold himself and his family and his finances and his business back due to a consideration that he had about pleasing his wife. By the way, in our society, a lot of times, this kind of thing, I mean, literally we have cliches about pleasing your spouse a lot of times. I mean, for the men, it's happy wife, happy life, right? As if that's really the primary directive for any husband, right? Like, can you imagine how constrained someone would be if that's their primary goal, right? And I'm not saying he can't please other people. I'm not saying he didn't want to make his wife happy, and that wasn't a good thing. It probably was 99% of the time. But it was still holding him back. It was obvious. Him making that the priority, even in business, in his own business decisions, to please someone else, wife or not, I was going to kill off any possibility of him ever having a business that worked, and probably ever having a life that worked, or ever being who he really is, for that matter. So he got it after some pretty intense coaching, and he went ahead and followed through. He quit his job. He made the transition, and he explained it to his wife, let her know what he had done, and then he called me, and he said, hey, Jeff, I did it. I told her I made the commitment. It's happening. And she took the kids and stormed out of the house and slammed the door, and she's obviously really upset. But I did it. I did what I had to do. And you know what? I think we're going to be okay. I think we're going to make it through this. We're going to have a great family. Everybody's going to be all right. Everybody's going to be happy in the end. Just not right at this moment. And I could just hear in his voice how proud he was of having the courage to do what he knew was right, even though it wasn't going to please his wife. And the power that gave him. It wasn't that he didn't care about her, right? It wasn't that he could care less. He really did care. That's why he was concerned. It's probably part of the reason why he was holding back at times. But he was no longer addicted to or attached to just pleasing her every moment. He made the priority what he knew was the right decision. I'll give you another example. A couple years ago, I was in my mastermind meeting where once a year, myself and the other members of my personal mastermind get together, and we compare notes and talk about what's been going on in our lives and plan the next year, create our vision. And there was a time during a couple masterminds ago when a couple of the members of my mastermind group, and we all kind of grill each other a bit from time to time, which is probably a good thing. But they were asking me, why are you doing this with your family? Why are you operating this way rather than that way? You need to spend more time here and less time there. And they were telling me all their opinions and their assessments of the way everything should be. And they were asking all these questions, and I was trying to explain to them what I thought. And after a while, I started to realize that it had gotten to the point where it wasn't them being curious about what's going on and trying to understand. It was more about manipulating my decisions and coercing me to do what they thought was right rather than what I really thought was right. Okay. And just got to the point where I said, look, like, I don't appreciate you judging me or trying to decide for me what I'm going to do. Which is, I think, what you're doing. This is what I've decided, and this is what I think is right, and this is why. That's all I could tell you, and I'm not going to get into any more detail about it. And I said it in a lot more intense way at the time, let's put it that way. And I was fairly upset. And we kind of got over it in a little while. It took a couple hours, but I kind of like licked my wounds, and we got back to the business of doing the mastermind. But I realized that force of me needing to please the other members of my mastermind, wanting them to feel good or think that it looked good what I was doing and how I operated, was a big deal. And the fact that they weren't pleased, the fact that they weren't agreeing, the fact that they didn't think it was the right way to operate, was actually really upsetting to me. And obviously was expressed fairly intensely on both sides, but I really felt their judgment, if you will. And I noticed from that experience, even in what I felt was a fairly evolved place in my life, I was still really heavily impacted by this force of what I call crowd pleasing, the need that I had, the attachment that I had, the neediness, if you will, to have them happy with the way I operated. And it was so intense for me that I was really upset with just this discussion where they were trying to kind of push me to do something differently. I got really defensive and pretty upset and kind of felt attacked. And like I said, I got over it. We all got over it. But that need, that attachment, that people-pleasing issue was still there even at that point. I don't think it really ever is going to go away from me. I don't think it goes away for most people. That's not the question. The question is, how does it hold you back? How does it limit you? How does it limit your accountability coaching? Because in my opinion, it's a huge limitation. I'll give you one more example. The other day, my daughter said to me, she was kind of in one of her moods, and she said to me, kind of in a very kind of fatalistic way, "You know what, Dad? It seems like everybody in life, they just kind of eventually kind of give up on their dreams. And she didn't say sell out, that was my words for it, but they kind of sell out, and then they just have to kind of go to work and just kind of get themselves through the day and just do what everybody else tells them to do." And she said, I'm going to do that too. I'm just going to lose my dreams like everyone else. That's what she said in so many words. And she was obviously not happy about this at all. She was pretty upset. And, probably one of the first times in her life at 9, she started to see the way people, like the patterns of the way a lot of people operate. Even the way that I and my wife and people that we know really well operate. And seeing that there were places where we compromised or held back or sold out and these kind of things that you just, a 9-year-old idealistic kid probably sees in almost every adult, right? And commitments that we make that don't look like they're really based on our greatest expression of who we are and what we desire for our lives, right? And so it would be natural for someone like that to say, I'm just going to lose my dreams like everybody else, and really be sad about it, like feel the loss of that. She says, I'm going to have to do that. That's just the way it's going to be, because that's what everybody does. That's what everybody has to do. And I told her, no, Talia, it's not true. You don't have to do that. You never have to do that. And she says, yeah, I will. She's kind of arguing with me. I said, no, you won't. You know why? You want to know the secret? As I kind of like dishing this out to my family sometimes. You want to know the secret to not losing out on your dreams? She said, okay, what? kind of half listening, right? And I said, the secret is, don't ever let what other people think change how you're going to operate in terms of your dreams. Don't let other people's point of views, other people's judgments stop you from what you know is best and what you know is right and what you really dream of. Because that's what people do. People do it every day. They let other people's points of view, other people's, whether they're pleased or not, impact whether or not they're gonna really live their dream. And if you don't let that stop you, you don't let pleasing people, pleasing the crowd stop you, then you will live your dream. Or at least you'll do the best you can to get there. And you won't stop like so many people that you've seen. So let's go ahead and watch a little bit from the Commitment to Leadership Mastery module, Module 2 of Effortless Enrollment Mastery, where we talk in a lot more detail about crowd pleasing. And what's really important to know about crowd pleasing is that it's the basis for everything we already talked about. This is what it's all about. All those perceptions, that's what it's all about. Crowd pleasing. This whole set of filters is all about crowd pleasing. Your version of that might be having power with others or acceptance from others, social power, social acceptance. It's just pleasing the crowd. Now, of course, it's ironic that those who need social acceptance are usually slaves to those who need social power. It's kind of an ecosystem in and of itself, but it's all the same game. It's just a different side of the same coin. It's really just crowd pleasing. Think about this. Why do you need to agree or disagree? Why do you need to understand if it's good or bad? Why do you need to get a sense of what's in it for you or what's in it for someone else? All those filters are just there so you can look good to the crowd. And the fears about not pleasing the crowd in whatever your form of that is. Think about it. Think about what you're getting about this whole conversation around awareness and how that applies to how you need to please the crowd. Think about it this way. Do you know how you can see right now? You can see what you can see, right? Here's what you can't see. Your eyes. You're never aware of them. You're only aware of what your eyes see. It takes rigor and discipline to pay attention to what's actually doing the seeing. What's actually shaping my world. So this is not just, when you watch this video, it's not just, say whatever's there for you and think about whatever's there for you. This is actually thinking, bringing intellectual effort to it. Most people don't think. They just have thoughts. Totally programmed. Totally shaped and molded by the world, the space of being human that they entered into. Totally programmed. And you'll destroy your life because you don't think. And if we took this video away, and we took me away, and we took my voice away, and the sounds and the pictures, that's what's called your life. And you would be at this screen forever doing the same thing over and over and over again until you die. Your life at some point became about crowd pleasing. Looking good to the crowd. Now, what happened to your vision as a result of that? Where is it? It's buried. Because if you really opened up again, if you just played full out, watching this video, if you just played full out, doing your assignments, you just played full out, pursuing your vision, pursuing your destiny as a coach, pursuing whatever it is that you really authentically care about and want for yourself and your life. If you really did that, what might happen? You might not please the crowd. It might look bad. How are you now about ever opening yourself up to what's really possible for you? You're afraid, you're shut down, you're resigned, you're cynical. You tell me. But this is why. That's why people become resigned and cynical. and you do everything you can to fix or change it, and you never will. And you never can, because your life is about this. And you've traded in who you were at the time, where all you wanted was to live life, serve others, whatever your ultimate vision or mission was. What you traded your soul in for is crowd pleasing. What does that attitude do to your vision? What does that attitude do to any vision? Kill it. Kill it. That's humanity. That's the history of mankind. Why is it that any human being that had a vision and went after it full bore got killed off? They were killed off by you and I, not by other human beings, you and I. Because the perception of human being doesn't tolerate a vision. So, what's Commitment to Leadership Mastery about? Vision. Guess what you're going to try to do to it? Kill it. Haven't you already? That's the phenomenon of crowd pleasing and the perception of human being. Okay, so that's crowd pleasing. Does that make sense? It is such an insidious force in human behavior, and especially in accountability. I mean, literally, the accountability conversation you're probably going to need to have with most of your clients many times is a conversation that's not going to be pleasing to your client. So if pleasing them is a primary directive in a coaching session especially, you're never going to hold them accountable very powerfully, or you're going to at least struggle through it. This was such a breakthrough for me, 10, 15 years ago when I first really got that particular mechanism. And I got a lot of really great one-on-one coaching from some master coaches who understood this very deeply and helped me get past it. I literally, and even to this day, I pulled this off my wall. I made a poster around the way that I articulate these two forces. And the first one I just call looking good. And looking good is kind of like, again, just like, how do you look to others? Like, are you worried about embarrassment and the optics of the way somebody else might judge you, right? And then the other one is, of course, people-pleasing, which is kind of the common vernacular around crowd-pleasing. It's like, am I a people-pleaser? Am I trying to please others? And you can see, next to these two, I put little effigies of devils. The looking good one is a little bit more of a cute one because, he's really actually trying to look good. But the people-pleasing is like a really ugly devil. Anyway, this is still on my wall to this day to remind me and have me never forget that my need to please people, my need to look good, my need, like that kind of tick, that attachment is one of my primary limitations as a coach, as a human being, as a business owner. In any area of my life, it's going to hold me back in really, really big ways. Some more than others, to be fair. So you've got to get that's a limitation for you, especially as an accountability coach. So what do you do about this? And this, again, this is not about what to do about it necessarily, but let's just talk for a second, especially around the crowd-pleasing thing. First of all, divorce yourself from the need to please people during your sessions. If you're still doing that kind of normal social graces, like just the whole, like, I'm trying to please my client thing during sessions, and that's like your big thing, that's like the priority for you, you got to divorce yourself from that. Like, you got to completely disconnect from that. You got to walk away from that. Does that mean you can't be pleasing in a session? No. But just don't make that your goal. Don't make that what you're up to in a session. That's not your job, especially as an accountability coach at all. I mean, there's no score for making somebody happy or pleasing them in a coaching session. So if you do that, but you fail in your accountability, you failed in accountability. You failed as a coach that day, right? Let's just call it what it is. So divorce yourself from pleasing your client. Next, stop being your client's friend. Now, let me be more specific on this one. It's not even stop being their friend. Let go of it. Don't even necessarily stop it. You can still be their friend. There's nothing wrong with being friends with their client. Again, that just can't be the primary driver for you in your coaching relationship. Let go of the stranglehold that you have on being their buddy, on being their friend. If you are attached to the friend thing with your client, if you're attached, or if you haven't let go of that, if you will, then that's going to stop you probably. It's going to be more pleasing, because that's with our friends. We were busy trying to put up with their pettiness and their whining, just please them and just put up with them. It's just not what your job is as a coach. It's not. Okay. So you don't have to stop being their friend, but you need to let go of being their friend. So you may be their friend or not at any moment, but you can't let being their friend get in the way of being their accountability coach. And if it is, and if the shoe fits on that one, then you need to get that. So remember, looking good, pleasing people, crowd pleasing, that's the devil. Okay? Remind yourself of that. Stay accountable to these distinctions of understanding how they get in your way and what you're up to, what you need to be committed to, so that they don't stop you. And you need to put intellectual and ontological effort. Who you be needs to, you need to have some commitments around that, so that none of this stops you from being the master accountability coach that I know you are. That will allow you to unleash accountability conversations that you never would have had you allowed these forces to stop you. So that said, you know the rest of the drill. Week 3 is no different than week 2. Run your sessions. I'll see you in the next training session. Follow through on your reporting and everything else that we're doing right now in your accountabilities and accountability coaching, accountability coach training. And then finally, in this immersion training, remember, your primary kind of work that you're doing are these sessions that you're practicing with each other. So unleash the accountability coach. Take it to the next level this week, and don't let any of this hold you back. I'll talk to you soon.